Now, here at the Halftime Brewskis podcast, we love a good sports bit. So we're on to the second quarter. See,
Wow,
I
very.
paused. I paused there for the gasps of the audience listening. We're like, oh, wow, we didn't expect that. Now we're going to talk about the rest of the Canadian teams, and really, we'll just touch on who did well, people they brought in, big changes in the teams. We have a unique halftime Brewskis trademarked, although not officially trademarked, fake trademarked scoring system, of which is a six pack. Now, I'll explain how it works. Basically, it's us deciding arbitrarily what we think. So we have free reign. We don't care. I mean, we care, but we don't care what you guys think of the six pack rating system because it is a phenomenal system. It's one that should be brought to the rest of the world. And it works a little bit like this. If it's good, I don't know, you get 3 out of 6 beers. If it's not as good, maybe you get 2. Maybe you get 4 beers and 2 sips. I don't know. We decide it based on whatever we really consider. So, on that note, we can only start in the nation's capital, the Ottawa Senators. They brought in Dadanoff, they brought in Murray. That's about it.
Yeah, but I think, from all honesty, Ottawa kind of had a blank slate.
I think they did well. Honestly,
this offseason.
they didn't make any mistakes, which is normally how we have to judge the Senators, is what mistakes have they made. But I think they've just done some, they have so much cap space that it doesn't really matter what's happening with regards to cap. So it's like you're bringing in 2 players who are going to help you. Good for you.
Yeah, and they brought in some kind of depth defensemen, and Eric Gabranson and Brown from Florida. I mean, their offseason was completely going to be built around their draft. And that was kind of their big kind of cachet moment. But, Matt Murray, yes, they overpaid for him on an extension. But, I mean, again, their cap doesn't matter. They have an insane amount of room. They just can't overcommit past kind of the 3 years where they project kind of Sanderson and kind of Stützle to be. And they didn't overextend. I think Murray's deal is only 4 years.
Yeah.
So I think they're protected in that sense. And they needed a goalie. So, I mean, to pay a second round pick to kind of get a 26-year-old 2-time Stanley Cup champion, I mean, just take a chance.
Yeah, and even though Murray had a bit of an up and down season last season, there's every chance that he turns around and is a steal at 6.25, is it?
6.25, I believe.
Yeah, so there's every chance that he's a steal there, and he will definitely improve them. So I give the Ottawa Senators 3 beers and 2 sips.
Wow, I was very close. They get 3 solid beers, and I give them about another half beer. So we're at about 3.5.
Ooh, okay, yeah, okay. I mean, they didn't do anything too wrong. Now we're gonna move. I mean, we'll just move to Montreal because I think they've probably, outside of Toronto, they've done the most. Although you could argue Calgary has. We'll get to them. But they added Josh Anderson, Tyler Toffoli, and Jake Allen. But they lost a big guy in, although technically smaller, but a big guy in Max Domi who's off to Columbus.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of mixed opinions about that trade. And this is coming from a massive Josh Anderson fan.
And the contract they signed him to as well. Then what was it? 5.5? 5.5 mil?
I think so. In over 7 years.
Yeah.
Look, good for them. They doubled down. Because that's, I believe they had 2 options, was either give him a 1 year and walk him to free agency, or you give him the full 7. So, I mean, they doubled down, and I think Josh Anderson has good underlying numbers, so I think he can be successful there. But I remember when you actually texted me about that trade before I saw it, and I don't know if you remember what I said, but you were like, it's Josh Anderson for Max Domi, and I'm like, okay, and you're like, and a pick, and I'm like, okay, so Columbus also gives Montreal a pick for Domi. That makes sense. And you're like,
absolutely. But no,
no,
it was the other way.
Yeah, it was the other way. And I was just like, yes, Josh Anderson's had a 27-goal season. He's big, he's strong, he's physical. He kind of plays the game the right way. But, I mean, Max Domi in a down year has 50 points. He's a second-line center.
Yeah.
I was a bit surprised that Montreal had to pay more to get Anderson. I from my perspective, I thought Domi would have had more value, but
especially considering Anderson's coming back off the bad injury he had. So yes, he's had good numbers when he's been playing, but it still remains to be seen how he's going to play after recovering and after coming back from injury.
Well, by the time the league starts back up, he'll have had a year off, so hopefully he'll be fine.
But it could lead to extra rustiness because it's been so long since he's played a professional game of hockey.
True. But I think when it all comes down to it at the end of the day, I think Montreal fans will look at it and be like, if Domi wanted to play center and that's what he was committed to playing, Montreal didn't need a center. Montreal, but just Montreal didn't need a center. They got Kakiniemi, they got Suzuki, and they got Philip Deneau. And then they got Paling and Jake Evans on their way. So they have depth at center. I don't think they have super, super high end depth. I think they just have really solid depth.
Yeah.
But it allowed them to kind of maybe take a loss on the trade from a value standpoint. But I still think Josh Anderson's going to be a great fit for them.
I agree.
He's going to be a nightmare for the Leafs to play. So
yeah, and I think the additions of Tyler Toffoli is I've liked Tyler Toffoli since he was on LA. I've always rated him, highly. Not I don't want to, he's not obviously elite, but I've always liked him as a player and what he can bring to a team for just that solid depth scoring. But I think a real steal is finally having a goalie they can hopefully trust, and not have to play Carey Price into the ground like they have done for the last. Well, how many years has Price been there? Yeah, what?
He was drafted
9 years.
5. So yeah, I think he made
10,
his debut.
So
maybe
what?
08,
13.
09, so yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe a bit earlier than that. But yeah, no. My only counterpoint to that is yes, I think they have one of the better backups in the league.
Yep.
And I guess this is more Price's fault than anything, but it's so hard to be successful when you commit that much money to your goaltending position. Like the fact that they have, over $14.5 million committed to their goaltending position, I think kind of took other options away from them. But I mean, at least for next season, they'll have a relief for Carey Price. And I think that's the most important thing because Carey Price isn't getting any younger. I think he's older than people think. So from that perspective, I think it was a good move. And they already re-signed him to a deal pays him maybe half of what he was making after. I think he's somewhere in the twos going forward. So either one thing is going to happen. He's either going to come back and be, $2 million backup goaltender, which makes sense, or he's going to be claimed by Seattle. So I think either option kind of provides them with depth. To the Toffoli thing, living in Vancouver, I kind of got to see a lot of Toffoli as kind of the season went on last year.
Yeah.
And I was kind of, not that I'm a Canucks fan, but I was kind of devastated for my Canucks friends.
Absolutely.
Because I think he was a perfect fit here in Vancouver. He's not a top line right winger, but he provides you depth scoring on that second line. And I think that's always been Montreal's problem, is that the sense that they've been a good team, but they haven't had consistent contributors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think getting more of that, Josh Anderson will help because I think he'll play in your top 9. Toffoli will play in your top 6 probably. Yeah, Brendan Gallagher now. You're starting to see the puzzles come together. Now, they don't have high-end offensive creators, but I think they're going to do it by committee, which is, I mean, if you have 3 really, really solid lines, Tampa showed that, I mean, if your third line's very productive, then it can be very, very good for your team, right? So
what's your halftime Brewskis trademarked rating?
Oh boy, what did I give them? I definitely gave them probably like a 4. They get 4 solid beverages.
Yeah.
And they might get like I don't want to. Yeah, I'll give them another half beverage, so they get like 4.5.
See,
because they did get Edmondson as well,
yes,
who I'm not a big fan of, but it's still another big addition that we didn't mention.
I went for 4 beers and a waterfall because you got the good 4, you've got the waterfall happening, so it could go well, but it also kind of just splashes all over you and you kind of look stupid, and it could go either way for Montreal.
Wow, you're taking it more metaphorically. I like it. Makes sense. There we go.
Genius.
Winnipeg. You partied once upon a time.
Yeah.
Winnipeg.
Boy. I went to Queens. Okay. Winnipeg.
Winnipeg's an interesting one, actually.
Yeah. Well, they brought back Paul Stastny.
Winnipeg's an interesting one.
Brought back Paul Stastny.
Yeah.
They signed Bellew.
Re-signed him, yeah.
Yeah, re-signed him. And
exactly. They made some depth defensive signings. Like they brought in Derek Forbett, who ended the year last year in Calgary. I think a bit of Winnipeg season or off season's been hung up on this Patrick Laine speculation. And look, if they're gonna, I don't think we're gonna get into that right now. But I think if they're gonna, it's an impossible trade to actually pull off, because I think unless you absolutely hit a home run, it's gonna be a wait and see. And I think Patrick Laine, if you wait and see with him, you're gonna get burned in that deal.
For sure.
Because I mean, if he's traded to Florida and he goes to play with Barkov, I mean, he's going to get 40 his first season. If he goes to Carolina and he plays with Sebastian Aho, he's going to get 40 this first season. So it's a bit like, I don't think he wants to leave, but I think he's stuck, and I think Winnipeg's kind of been stuck in this holding pattern. I think the Paul Stastny deal makes sense, though. Paying your second line center, I think he's up over $6.5 million.
Yeah, but they also,
I think it's risky for his age.
They did that a little bit because they were forced to with Brian Little having to sit out the season. So their hand was forced to an extent in having to bring him back.
Yeah, I think there probably would have been other options that would have been cheaper. I mean, like for Tyler Johnson, they're giving him away. Like you wouldn't have had to give anything to get Tyler Johnson, who's younger, who's paid less, who's probably more productive. But
Absolutely.
that's neither here nor there. I think the biggest problem for Winnipeg was a problem that they had last offseason, was that the fact that they traded Jacob Trouba, Myers walked, and then Bufflin retired. And in the span of one summer, you lost the best right-sided defense in the league, and replaced it with nothing. So going forward, I know they have Neil Pionk. They re-signed Dylan DeMello. I still think that's an area that needs to be fixed. I think that right side, the defense is definitely a work in progress. And I think that defensive core as a whole is a work in progress, as being seen by them signing Derek Forbett and bringing back Lucas Spiza and Nathan Beaulieu.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, I don't give them a high score, but it's almost, I don't want to give them a score because I think it's kind of an NA right now, because I just don't think you can judge them until this offseason's been finished.
Yeah.
Until a decision's been made on Patrick Laine, I think it's impossible to give them a concrete rating.
Yeah.
Because if they go trade Laine for Ekblad, I mean, that changes the way things are thought of.
For sure.
I know I just dropped a maybe, but I mean, from that perspective, I think the deal would make sense. But
well, I'm a savage, so I will give them a score, and it's 2. It's just straight 2 beers, and it's like you reach for the third and you feel a bit sick because you're a lightweight and you didn't know what you were doing. And goodbye and good night. Let's move on to Edmonton.